negotiate on whether or not you should read Never Split the Difference. And since I've read it, I bet you I'd win. All jokes aside, Never Split the Difference is the negotiating book for you. This book has inspired me to want to pursue a deeper knowledge of negotiation. So much so that I had a dream about it the other day, a little bit concerning. In this book, Chris Voss, the author, takes you through his experience as a hostage negotiator, offering valuable insights into the world of negotiation. He even provides practical steps for negotiating salary and rent, much less heavy topics. One thing that I liked about this book was that Voss provided great chapter summaries. There were a lot of tips and tricks, so these summaries will really come in handy when you need a little bit of a refresher. And there were so many helpful lessons in this book that it was difficult to narrow it down to a few. So definitely read the book. For example, I learned that people who overuse personal pronouns are less important than you might think. And the less important someone makes himself seem, the more important they probably are. But the thing that was most interesting to me about this book was that many of the tactics Voss implements are basics used in counseling and therapy. So I thought these would be a good place to start. And just a little bit of background on this, I took an Introduction to Counseling and Therapy class last spring at UNC. So I am by no means an expert, but you will hear me reference this class a couple times, and that's where my background comes from. So one of the first things that is necessary in a successful negotiation, or even just in a conversation, is the proper use of silence. Silence oftentimes makes people feel uncomfortable, but building in silences in conversations helps people to have time to think, especially if they're slow, or just further their statements. I've seen this happen multiple times. It feels awkward at first, we want to fill the void with words, but the next time you're talking to someone, let there be some silence after they finish speaking, and see if they don't try to fill the void. I remember having to practice this for my class and record my findings. Almost always, people continue to expound upon their previous statement, giving you deeper information. As you use silence, you can also use some minimal encouragers. This includes short statements like yes, okay, or as you can see, I'm moving my head, body language, so nods and things like that. Mirroring is the next tactic you can use. Mirroring is exactly what it sounds like. You repeat back the most important words that were just stated. It sounds so bizarre, and I know, and feels very uncomfortable when you try it, but it works. Repeating back the important words gets your counterpart to further explain themselves and forces you to really listen to what they're saying. It definitely takes practice because, oftentimes we're thinking, how should I respond? Instead of really listening. Science has shown us that we copy one another to comfort one another, and ultimately it leads to trust. Mirroring is important in negotiation because it helps you to build rapport as well as extract as much uncovered information as possible. Because as Voss later discusses, each negotiation has a black swan, or unknown unknowns, which are vital to winning negotiations. Voss gives an example of a study where waitresses either used encouraging words such as good or great to their customers, while the other half just mirrored back the order. The waitresses who mirrored got a 70% higher tip, and if that doesn't encourage you to mirror, then I'm not sure what will. Negotiations are often filled with emotion, so you have to figure out how to navigate them, and instead of fighting them, you should identify and influence them. One way to do this is through labeling. According to the book, labeling is a way of validating someone's emotions by acknowledging it. It says it should be viewed as a shortcut to intimacy. By labeling emotions, you show that you identify with your counterpart and are really listening. It allows you to put a name to the face, so to speak, and it ends up diffusing the power of the emotion. So you should start labeling off by saying something like, it sounds like, it seems like you value blank, or it looks like. For example, you could say, it seems like you are frustrated with the way this is going, or something like that. Again, this seems uncomfortable and we're really worried about mislabeling, but people rarely notice that you're labeling, and if you do mislabel, it gives them the chance to correct you, giving you a clear picture of where they really stand. The book says, labeling invites the other person to reveal themselves, and silence is the perfect pair for labeling. After you label, just let it sit. Something I learned in my Intro to Counseling and Therapy class is that we often second guess ourselves or fill in the silences when really we should just let our statements stand. And that's really applicable to everything. Paraphrasing is what comes next. In a paraphrase, you should repeat back a chunk of what your counterpart said, but in your own words. This has a similar effect as labeling. Saying things in your own words is very important because you want your counterpart to know that you really do understand and can articulate what they're saying and also how they are feeling. Unlike mirroring, your words shouldn't just be verbatim. And just to reiterate the value of these tools, remember that negotiation is often hinged on trust, and these tactics help to build it. When you're wrapping things up, you really want to summarize. You should hit all of the highlights of your conversation. You should talk about the substances of the conversation as well as the underlying emotions that were present. You can think of this as a combination of labeling and paraphrasing. And if you've given a good summary, you will hear your counterpart say, "That's right," and not "you're right." If people say "you're right," then you haven't really made any progress because "you're right" means they do not own the conclusion. Think about the last time you said "you're right" to someone. It was probably in resignation, or you were trying to get them to leave you alone. In contrast, "that's right" is an acceptance and ownership of the idea or the conclusion. These steps are really only scratching the surface of the cool things that you can learn in this book. Most of our lives, we are negotiating whether we know it or not, so we might as well be good at it. And the awesome thing is that you can actually implement all of these practices in your daily conversations to become a better listener. Remember to add silences, mirror, label, summarize, and get to the "that's right." But most importantly, never split the difference. And if you want to find out what that means, you'll have to read the book. Make sure to follow the hashtag #TheSpinalTap, and until next time, happy reading.